Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to be your mentor today for our masterclass on visual composition. If you've ever felt intimidated by the whole idea of framing the quote-unquote perfect shot, I want you to just strip that fear away right now. Honestly, you already know these rules. You've literally spent your entire life consuming images, watching films, scrolling through photographs, looking at art. So today, we're really just putting formal names to the techniques you already instinctively feel and understand.
And that brings us to the ultimate challenge. I want to pose this directly to you as a student of cinematography. How do you actually tell a story in a single image? For a lot of artists and filmmakers, solving this is the central goal of their entire career. It's the absolute foundation of our mentorship today. We're going to break down exactly how you can arrange the elements inside your frame to convey really profound messages without ever needing to say a single word.
So here's our syllabus for today. First up, the language of images, then guiding the viewer's eye. Third, activating space and depth. Fourth, the psychology of balance. And finally, contrast, color, and angle.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the language of images.
Okay, the absolute most important lesson in the language of images is our very first core principle, and that is simplicity. Simplicity is basically the philosophy of creating only what is necessary within a work of art and then ruthlessly discarding everything else. As a cinematographer, this has to be your starting point. You have to actively decide what is absolutely critical to express your idea.
Just take a look at this single, vivid red rose from the film American Beauty. Notice how the framing completely eliminates all the background distractions? It's just totally enveloped in darkness. By discarding literally everything that's unnecessary, the one remaining subject gets this profound, undeniable power. You are telling the viewer, without a doubt, exactly what matters. Moving right along to section 2, guiding the viewer's eye.
So let's dive into an incredibly famous guideline you've probably heard of, the rule of thirds. This simply involves dividing your image into thirds, both horizontally and vertically. What it does is create a natural, invisible grid right over your frame. And our eyes inherently want to follow this grid, which actually makes off-center compositions way more pleasing to look at than just dead center framing.
Check out this beautiful shot from Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Look closely at how Kubrick places the actors' faces exactly on those upper intersection points. By aligning their natural eye lines right on this invisible grid, he creates an incredibly pleasing and structurally solid frame. It tells us exactly where we need to focus.
But beyond grids, we also have leading lines. Think of these as actual or even imaginary lines in a shot that intuitively direct the viewer's eye toward your key elements. They're basically the architectural or environmental pathways that you use to physically draw a map for your audience's eyes to follow.
Building on his total mastery of geometry, look at how Kubrick utilizes one-point perspective here. He uses the literal walls of the spaceship hallway to converge directly onto the astronaut walking right down the center. Every single line points to the subject. He is forcing you to look exactly where he wants you to.
All right, on to section 3, activating space and depth.
Now, to really understand space, we have to talk about negative space. This is the empty space surrounding your subject, because sometimes what you don't show is just as important as what you do show. Empty space carries immense emotional weight. It can be a phenomenal storytelling device.
Take Andrew Wyeth's famous painting, Christina's World. Do you see how he places the subject all the way down at the bottom, incredibly far away from the farmhouse at the top? He's utilizing massive amounts of empty, negative space, all that grass, to make her feel completely isolated and psychologically vulnerable. The space itself is doing the heavy lifting. It's telling the story.
Let's shift over to the z-axis and see how this builds into three-dimensional depth. Because remember, to fake 3D depth on a flat 2D screen, you have to construct your image in 3 distinct layers. You've got the foreground, which is closest to the camera, the middle ground where your subject typically lives, and the background, which shows the wider environment.
Look at this fantastic composition from Stranger Things. By incorporating the really jagged texture of the rocks in the foreground, placing the subjects in the middle ground, and then layering those trees in the background, this composition instantly gives you a tactile sense of depth. You immediately understand the scale of the location.
Next up, Section 4, the psychology of balance.
As your mentor, I really have to remind you that every single spatial decision you make dictates how an image actually feels to your audience. We primarily deal with 2 types of balance here. Symmetrical balance is incredibly satisfying. It demands central focus, and it naturally soothes the viewer. Conversely, asymmetrical balance leaves things intentionally off-kilter. It instinctively creates a sense of unresolved tension, dynamic disconnect, or even unease.
Notice how director Wes Anderson perfectly mirrors the left and right sides of this lighthouse frame in Moonrise Kingdom. This highly stylized, totally symmetrical balance immediately forces your eye right to the centered character. It creates a very satisfying, controlled, almost storybook-like aesthetic. But on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, Denis Villeneuve shoves the alien far to the left in this shot from Arrival. He leaves the entire right side feeling incredibly empty and unbalanced. He is using that asymmetry to physically manifest the tension, the fear of the unknown, and the immense communication barrier between the two species.
And finally, Section 5, Contrast, Color, and Angle.
Let's talk about contrast through a really cool concept called chiaroscuro. It's a classical technique that was actually forged during the Renaissance, and it combines clear, bright light with deep, dark obscurity. It's a lighting philosophy that modern filmmakers have just enthusiastically stolen from painters, and they use it to add incredible dramatic volume and separation to their shots.
The crucial point is illustrated perfectly right here in Caravaggio's St. Jerome writing. Look at how he essentially swallows the entire background in pure blackness. This allows the intensely bright subject to just punch right through the frame in 3 dimensions. That dramatic contrast tells you, without a doubt, exactly who holds the power and focus in this image.
Finally, never ever forget that your literal camera angle is a psychological weapon. Shooting from a low angle, looking up, like in this frame from 7, gives your subject ultimate dominance and power. Conversely, if you shoot from a high angle, looking down, you can physically crush your subject with vulnerability and weakness.
And that officially concludes our masterclass. You now have the foundational tools to take total control of your frame. You understand simplicity, leading lines, space, balance, and angles. So my final assignment for you is this. Next time you look through a viewfinder, what story will your composition tell? The tools are yours now, so start designing your visual narrative today. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. I'll catch you next time.